now, joined by the Senate Majority Leader, Reid. Welcome back to Meet the Press. Pleasure to have you.
Glad to be here, Dave.
I do want to talk politics with you about the Republican trail, but I want to talk about what's going on in Washington first. This is not a great time to be a Washington insider. You just look at the polling, what was called the worst Congress ever. Look at the disapproval of Congress at 66%. As you're going into this new year, Democrats, job approval of Democrats in Congress, let me be more specific, disapproval at 66%. What can you, as the majority leader, or the president do to change that?
First of all, I understand the frustration of the American people. I feel the same way. But understand that we've had obstructionism on steroids. The Republican leader, my counterpart, Mitch McConnell, said his #1 goal at the beginning of this Congress was to defeat President Obama, not have him reelected. And that's how they've legislated. We've spent months on things that used to happen just matter-of-factly. Raising the debt ceiling. We did it for President Reagan 18 times, and we spent 2.5 months doing that. So the #1 goal, and I hope the Republicans have learned a lesson, has extending the payroll tax. That was a disaster for them. Can you imagine Republicans, as reported in the Wall Street Journal, were opposed to lowering taxes? So I would hope that they understand that everything doesn't have to be a fight. Legislation is the art of working together, building consensus, compromise. And I hope that the Tea Party doesn't have the influence in this next year they had in the previous year. Because it has been really bad for this country. And I understand, I repeat, why the American people feel the way they do.
When almost a year ago I talked to you, you thought the Tea Party would die out as the economy got better. You weren't right about that.
Well, I think the Tea Party is dying out as the economy is getting better slowly.
You do think that?
Oh, sure, no question about it.
Well, we just talked about their muscular impact on the process.
Well, but that's during the past year. I would hope that the two Republican leaders have learned what took place in the previous year. And you know, what we have to focus on this year is rebuilding the economy. We have to, and the only way to do that is to create jobs. And that's why the agenda that I'm moving forward on, I hope with some cooperation from the Republicans this time, is to do something about creating jobs. Our surface transportation bill, it'll save 1 million jobs, create a lot more jobs. Federal Aviation Administration, that's more than 200,000 jobs. We're having a very important piece of legislation that's important to this network right here, IP, and that's, of course, dealing with informational, with making sure that we have intellectual property that's protected, and we need to do that. And that's also job saving. So that's what we need to work on, things that create jobs and protect the American economy.
Just on that point, because it's been a big issue as I'm on Facebook and I'm on Twitter, people saying that in fact that's a bill that appears to be helpful, but could have an effect of really clamping down on free expression on the internet.
This bill was reported out of the committee in May, unanimously, Democrats and Republicans. And in recent weeks, organizations like Google and Facebook and others have said, well, there's some problems this could create. And I think they're right. I think it could create some problems. That's why I've spoken to Senator Leahy, chairman of the committee. I've written a letter to the ranking member, Senator Grassley, saying there's some issues that have come up, but I think we need to have this a winner for everyone, not just for the content people. And I've spoken at length with Senator Feinstein. She's got the eye of the storm in California because that's where a lot of the theft of music and movies is taking place, and also where Google and Facebook is headquartered. So we need to work on this, and we're going to, I hope we can have a manager's amendment when we get back here in a week or 10 days and move forward on this. It's important that we try to do this on a fair basis, and I'm going to do everything I can to get that done.
I want to, you mentioned Senator McConnell promising to make the president a one-term president, and I hope you don't mind, but last week during the debate I actually invoked your name to raise this question about how Washington works. This was the question that I posed to Newt Gingrich during the debate last week. Speaker Gingrich, if you become President Gingrich and the leader of the Democrats, Reid, says he's going to promise to make you a one-term president, how would you propose to work with someone like that in order to achieve results in Washington?
I think every president who works with the leader of every opposition knows they're working with somebody who wants to make them a one-term president.
Don't you agree with that? I mean, you led the charge against President Bush. You were pleased when his approval ratings were knocked down. I mean, Gingrich is saying this is how it's done in Washington.
Listen, you can be against having someone reelected, but not have that as your #1 goal. That's what's the problem. We have had obstructionism on, I repeat, steroids. We need to work together. That's the name of the game here, and it hasn't happened. The only way you get things done is by cooperation, building consensus. And if we're going to rebuild America, which I think is our #1 program, we have to do that by creating jobs.
You talk about who should have the most influence in this new year, and Gallup had a poll that was very interesting. I'll put it up on the screen. 46% said President Obama, but 42% said Republicans in Congress. And this is after you and President Obama have been out there campaigning saying it's all the Republicans' fault. They're standing in the way. They won't get anything done, and yet it's pretty tight between who should have most influence, whether it should be the president or Republicans.
We know that we have a unique form of government, a constitution, which I think has been the most defining document in the history of the world for having good government. We have 3 separate equal branches of government. And the only way you get things done is not having one dictate what happens, not the legislative branch, not the executive branch, or the judiciary. It's all a balance, and that's what I think that we have to look for this coming year. We haven't had that balance because we've had one arm of our bicameral legislature that has said we're going to do nothing except go after Obama. That's not the way we get things done.
But you know what they're saying. I mean, look, here, you run the Senate. Democrats haven't put together a budget in a year. The Republicans in the House are doing that. So you can say that they're holding the process hostage, but they're actually getting things done. That's the argument they've made. Are they wrong?
David, you know, having been around Washington a long time, how the Senate works. And the Senate works on consensus. And we haven't been able to get that because of Republicans. I repeat for the 3rd time, I want to make sure everyone understands this. Obstructionism on steroids.
No, I wrote that down.
Okay, so that's been the problem. And I hope with what happened the last week of this last year in Congress, that the Republicans have learned that they can't be guided by the Tea Party, because the Tea Party is putting them right over the cliff. You want to talk about polling? The recent poll shows that American people favor Democrats in Congress by 40% to 22% for the Republicans. So polling, there are all kinds of polls. The point is, they don't matter. We're in a new year of this Congress, and what I want to do is to work to get things done to rebuild this economy.
We talk about the president and his approach to Congress, because ultimately you can talk about building consensus. It requires leadership on the part of both parties to actually achieve results. This was interesting. It caught my eye from the USA Today talking about the president's approach. In the wake of failed budget negotiations that nearly led to a government default last summer, Obama has largely given up on compromise. He's not giving up on moderation, said John Podesta, former White House chief of staff under Clinton, who ran Obama's transition team after the '08 election. He's just giving up on the Republican leadership in the House and Senate. I'm listening to you this morning, and you sound about the same. Have you given up on the prospect of real compromise this year?
I think I've said clearly today that I think we need to work together. There are things we need to get done this year to continue the momentum the economy has. Does the economy have enough momentum? Of course not. But for 22 months, we've built on private sector jobs. We have so much more that needs to be done. So I look at the glass as being half full, not half empty. I hope that the Republicans will understand, as I think they learned in the last week of last year, that they can't be led over the cliff by this extremism that's in the Republican Party.
So the State of the Union address, what does the president say to the Congress and to the country that breaks this logjam? What can he say that gets Republicans, off the sidelines, as you would put it, to actually start negotiating with Democrats?
The president, to his credit, for 2.5 years, bent over backwards to develop bipartisanship. He had people down at the White House. Republicans down at the White House. He came to Capitol Hill. No one can ever criticize the president for not reaching out to Republicans, because he has done that. Since last September, we have been more directed in saying we're going to have to do things without the Republicans, and that's what we've done. That's what we did with his jobs bill. We kept bringing votes forward to move the American economy forward. Look at one of the things that we did that was so important. We thought it was wrong that we kept blaming off police officers and firefighters and teachers around the country. So we said, well, I think that we have to have the whole American populace work together. And so we said, the millionaires, people who make more than $1 million a year, shouldn't they contribute a little bit to keep the cops and the police, the cops and the firefighters and the teachers on the job? And so what we wanted to do, and this is the legislation, we wanted to have millionaires, that is people who make more than $1 million a year. The second million, they would pay 1/2 of 1% surtax. Every Republican voted against that. Every Republican.
But Senator, you are talking about the fact that Democrats are dug in on the idea that the rich should pay more in taxes. We know Republicans feel the opposite is true, that taxes would hurt economic recovery. And I asked you, what can the president do to break this logjam? And your answer is, well, let's just hope that they'll do better and come to their senses, and the president's been trying so hard. I mean, there's nothing here for people listening to this to say, oh, I can see something changing in Washington. The tone from you is not changing. You're blaming the Tea Party. Republicans are blaming this president for not reaching out in a real way, not really trying to compromise. Is there anything that can be done that can really change the dynamic?
I don't think, David, anyone can question, or they shouldn't question, are having reached out to the Republicans. I say Obama, I say me. We've done everything we could to work with them. We're going to continue to do that. In spite of the obstructionism, we've been able to accomplish a lot of good things during the last Congress. Even someone as conservative as Ornstein said that it was the most productive Congress in the last 75 years. So we can't talk about not having gotten anything done. In spite of the Republicans, we've gotten a lot of things done. We had the most productive Congress in the history of the country just last Congress. I think we can build upon that. This Congress isn't over. All I ask is for the Republicans to understand what legislation is all about. It's the art of compromise and building a consensus.
You know, unfortunately, the way Washington works is what people are focused on, and even this recess appointment of Richard Cordray to head this Consumer Protection Bureau, this has been a big issue on the campaign trail because you're in a pro forma session, not a real recess session in the parlance of Washington. This is what Governor Romney has been saying about it. He said it just last night.
Well, I think what you're seeing with the president is extra constitutional action, where he is taking his friends and putting them into positions of power. He doesn't want to have to work with both parties. He wants to jam through whatever he'd like to do.
This is Washington at work as far as the Republicans are concerned.
One of the things that the president has done has been so popular is appointing Cordray. Here's a man, not a single Republican questioned his qualifications, not one in Congress. He's a man that was qualified. They didn't want Cordray because they didn't like our having reformed Wall Street. So we did what a lot of presidents have done in the past. When I say we, with the White House, I mean, what he's doing is criticizing Teddy Roosevelt, who recess appointed 160 people. Ronald Reagan recess appointed people. And I think the president did the right thing.
But is it a trick here? You're not really in recess, are you?
Listen, the point is this. The president is entitled by our Constitution to appoint people. The Republicans have made it so that the National Labor Relations Board, they didn't want it to even work. So he had to do recess appointments here. Cordray, we have consumers that need protecting. That's what this is all about, and that's why it was such a good move by the president. So I am confident that the president's recess appointments will be upheld in the courts. I think without any question, that'll be the case.
All right, let me go through some issues quickly if I can.
And if I could say this, David, you know, the recess appointment deal is something I came up with, you know, during the Bush years. But the reason Bush didn't do recess appointments during the time we had the so-called recess is because I worked with him. We gave President Bush hundreds and hundreds of people. He didn't have to worry about recess appointments because we were working with him. So because I believed then, I believe now, that a president has a right to make appointments.
Let me go through some issues quickly. You talk about the economy, income inequality. We talked to Susie Orman for our press pass conversation, which is on our website. I want to play a clip of her and ask how the president will deal with it.
When the truth of the matter is that the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer. And years ago, I used to say the middle class is going to disappear. The middle class has disappeared. Today, as I sit here, there is a highway into poverty. There is not even a sidewalk anymore to get out.
Specifically, State of the Union coming up. What is the inequality agenda for Democrats as we get into this new year?
To create jobs, to have the richest of the rich contribute to the problems we have in the country. That's what our agenda is. And I couldn't have said it better than she did. I think she is absolutely right. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and the middle class is being squeezed almost to death.
What is your take on Mitt Romney? Is he the nominee for the Republicans?
Listen, I listened to the interview of Newt Gingrich. I've watched the battles during this primary, and there's a lot going on in the primary. Republicans beating up on each other. I'm going to stay out of the presidential Republican primary.
You think he has a core?
I don't know what a core means.
Well, you've said before that he's a man who doesn't know who he is.
Listen, the Republicans have said a lot of things, good and bad, about Romney. And I think I don't need to interject myself into the Republican primary.
What about the Democrats this fall in the Senate? You have 23 Democratic seats up for re-election in November. Only 10 Republican seats are up, and Nelson just announced he's retiring. Do you think losing control of the Senate for the Democrats is a possibility?
We're doing extremely well. We're doing well because people across the country know what Democrats stand for. We stand for taking care of the middle class, rebuilding America. We don't believe that you should be stripping good things from the senior citizens of this country in an effort to do good things for the richest of the rich. We believe that health care should not be rationed, and people know that. And we're going to do just fine come November.
You're not vulnerable to losing the Senate in your judgment?
I think we're looking pretty good.
Looking pretty good. What about in Nebraska? Would you like to see former Senator Bob Kerrey run for that seat of Ben Nelson's?
Who wouldn't? Bob Kerrey is one of the most interesting, dynamic, heroic people I've ever served with in the United States Senate. He is a wonderful human being, as proven in the battlefield and proven when he was a legislator and governor.
Best Democratic prospect?
Oh, we have a lot of good Democratic prospects. I mean, we've got Massachusetts, we've got North Dakota, we've got Arizona, we've got Nevada. We're doing just fine with prospects. Kerry would certainly add to that.
All right, Senator Reid, we'll leave it there. Thank you.